I always wanted to fly. Not metaphorically. Not follow your dreams fly. I mean actual, physical, leave the ground fly. Which is already a problem. Because I had zero talent, zero money, and a body that strongly preferred gravity. I tried anyway. And I failed. Repeatedly. In public. But here's the weird part. My dream came true way earlier than it was supposed to. Not in the sky, not in a plane. In a way I didn't plan, didn't deserve yet, and definitely wasn't ready for. This is the story of how wanting to fly almost ruined my life, and somehow ended up lifting me off the ground. Chapter 1. The problem with wanting to fly. I wanted to fly. Not metaphorically. Not in my heart. Not in business. I wanted to fly for real, physically, truly fly. Like a bird. Or at least like that guy from the Red Bull commercial who looks like he knows exactly what he's doing, even though he obviously doesn't. And the problem wasn't that I didn't live in the right country. And it wasn't that I didn't have money. And it wasn't even that I had an IQ about the same as a toaster on defrost mode. The problem was simpler. I had no talent whatsoever for flying. As children, we all dream of something extraordinary. Some want to be astronauts. Some want to be president. Some want to be rappers, even though their rhythm is like a microwave. And I looked up at the sky and thought, why am I not up there? And why am I standing on the ground like some kind of NPC? I was the guy who stared at planes for too long. People thought I was a philosopher. In reality, I was just imagining waving to the pilot and him saying, "Yeah, hop in, buddy." The first warning sign was when I decided to check if it was possible to learn to fly on my own. YouTube didn't exist yet. Google was dumber than me. And that says a lot. My plan was simple. 1. Watch birds. 2. Draw conclusions. 3. Fly away. In retrospect, it wasn't a plan, but a threat to humanity. I started with my hands. I looked at my hands and thought, well, the shape is almost the same. Yes, they had no feathers. Yes, they didn't move like wings. Yes, they had nothing in common with wings at all. But I was motivated. Then I moved on to practice. Small jumps. From the steps. From the curb. I didn't fly. I just fell faster. And every time my brain goes, interesting data. My friend once said, "Dude, maybe you just like the idea of flying, not the actual flying?" I was offended, because he was right. And that's the worst thing a friend can do. But you know what's funny? I didn't give up. Because in American success stories, no one gives up. They either win or become TED speakers. And it was at that moment, when I was completely unprepared, when I had no plan, no skills, no common sense, life said, "Okay, you want to fly? Here you go." But not the way I imagined it. Early signs I was absolutely not built for this. There's one thing no one tells you about dreams. They don't start out beautiful. They don't come with motivational music. They come like this. Hey, what if you spend a lot of time on something that you're really bad at? And of course, I said, sounds fun. If this were a classic American story, there would be a moment where the coach looks at me and says, "Kid, you've got something special." But the reality was different. They looked at me as if I had just asked someone to invest in thin air. I tried everything. Books about aviation, documentaries, movies, people who looked like pilots. This is important. I thought, if I stay close to these people long enough, something will pass through the air. Nothing did. Not even close. The worst part was that I looked too serious. It was the kind of seriousness that screams, I don't know anything, but I don't want you to notice. My body wasn't very supportive of the idea of flying either. I wasn't too strong, too fast, too coordinated. I was optimistic. And optimism is not a muscle. I remember the moment when I thought, okay, I need more height. That's always a bad sign. I was standing on a hill. Not high enough to regret it. Not enough to fly. And in my head there was a monologue that now sounds like criminal evidence. Well, if I jump a little and really believe, maybe, I don't know, something will happen? Spoiler, something happened. I fell. Not dramatically. No slow motion. I fell the way people fall who have just learned that physics is no joke. I lay on the ground and looked up at the sky. And you know what? I didn't think, never again. I thought, okay, but almost. That was the first sign that something was wrong with me. Everyone else had reasonable dreams. The problem with dreaming of flying is that there are always people around with normal goals. My friends wanted a stable job, a car, a house, normal sleep. I wanted to stop touching the ground. When you are asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you answer, in the air. This does not motivate investors. People tried to be polite. That's a cool dream. Very original. Is there a plan? A plan. I hated that word. Because every time someone said it, my brain would respond, enthusiasm plus faith plus maybe luck? Sometimes I caught myself thinking, what if I just want to run away? From responsibility, from adult life, from bills, from the phrase, you have to be realistic. Because when you're in the sky, no one tells you who you should be. The point where everything could have ended. It was evening, the kind of evening when even the lamp looks tired. I was sitting and watching a video with airplanes. And suddenly, I felt it. Not motivation, not inspiration. That deep, unpleasant doubt that asks, what if this isn't your story? It was the moment when a normal person would say, okay, time to stop. But I did something else. I laughed. Because if I can't fly, at least I can be very funny trying. And, as it turned out later, that was the beginning of the flight. My dream wasn't dead yet. It just started to mutate. And life was already giving me hints. Strange ones. Invisible. Absurd. I just didn't know yet that my first real takeoff would not happen in the sky. The first adult failure. There is a difference between a child's failure and an adult's failure. A child's failure is when you fall and everyone laughs. An adult failure is when you fall and everyone is silent. And I just fell into the second category. One day, I had a terrible realization. Dreams are cool, but renting is somehow more persistent. I didn't fly. I wasn't getting any closer to flying. I was getting closer to a negative balance in my account. At some point, life looked like this. Money, minimum. No plans. Faith, a lot. Suspiciously a lot. I was that guy who says, everything will be fine, and didn't understand why. I tried to find a job. Not a career, not a vocation. Just something that would allow me to eat, not live in a box. Sometimes look at the sky without feeling guilty. The problem was that I couldn't explain who I was properly. What is your goal? To fly. What skills? Faith. Experience? Falling. That doesn't sell very well. Money is a strange thing. When you have it, you don't think about it. When you don't have it, all you think about is money. I counted as if I were preparing for a nuclear winter. Okay, if I eat this tomorrow and just look at it today. I started taking on strange, odd jobs. The kind where they don't ask, "Who do you want to be?" but ask, "Are you alive?" I worked where no one looked at the sky. Everyone looked at their watches. Dreams were put away in a box labeled later. And you know what's the scariest thing? It started to seem normal. Once, I caught myself thinking, what if this is what life is? That's when it got really scary. In all great stories, there is a moment that looks like idiocy from the outside. It's a decision that makes people say, well, at least he tried. It's a polite way of saying, God, what a fool. I sat alone. It was late. Too late for healthy decisions. And I thought, what if the problem isn't the flight, but in how I look at it? It was a dangerous thought, because suddenly I remembered all the moments when people listened to me. Not when I talked about airplanes, but when I laughed at myself. When I told them how I fell, how it didn't work out, how silly I looked. And then something clicked. Not an epiphany, not a life mission, an idea. The almost invisible turning point. Here's the truth that no one sells in motivational videos. Big changes start quietly, without fanfare, without music, without confidence. I didn't say, this is my path. I said, what if I just try? I started talking, to write, telling stories, not about success, about failures. And suddenly something strange happened. People listened. They laughed. They nodded. They said, dude, that's me. And for the first time, I felt lightness, as if I had broken away from the ground for a second. I still hadn't flown, physically, no, but something had changed. My dream was no longer about the sky. It was about the feeling of flying. And life, as always, smiled crookedly and said, okay, now we can start the real chaos. Chapter 2. Tiny wins are the most dangerous ones. The biggest trap in life is small victories. Not big ones, not the ones followed by fireworks, but the ones that whisper, see, you said it would work out. I started getting a reaction. People wrote, responded, laughed in the right places. And that was worse than a complete zero. Because zero is honest, but a small plus is a lie. I thought, okay, maybe I'm finally in the air? No, I was just standing on a stool. One day someone said, dude, you're actually good at this. And instead of feeling happy, I felt panic. Because now there was a choice. Either it was true or I was deceiving everyone. And both options were frightening. I started trying harder, think less, pretend that I know where I'm going. The classic strategy of a person who has no control over anything. I stopped laughing at myself so easily. Because if you are talented, you can't be funny by accident. Now everything matters. And that was the beginning of the problems. The first money is not a joy. It's, wow, what if it stops coming? When you get paid for something that you did for free, it doesn't make you more confident. It makes you more cautious. I started counting not dreams. I started counting risks. And every risk looked like, what if this was my only chance? Impostor syndrome, my old friend. It comes quietly. It doesn't say, you're a fake. He says, you just haven't been exposed yet. I woke up thinking, today they'll understand. That not a genius, not an expert. I don't have a map, just wandering aimlessly. And the worst part? It's true. But instead of accepting it, I started playing a role. Trying to fly higher too fast. That's where I really screwed up. I thought, if it works a little, let's go twice as fast. More content, fewer breaks, less life. I stopped looking at the sky. I looked at numbers. And for the first time in my life, I envied people who just lived. Falling rarely looks beautiful. No slow motion, no music. Just a message that never arrived. A call that didn't ring. Numbers that stopped. I sat and thought, is that it? It's not a tragedy, not the end of the world. Just silence. And you know what's the scariest thing? I felt relieved, because now I didn't have to pretend. Rock bottom is boring. No one says that rock bottom is boring. It's not heroic, not dramatic, just mundane. I counted my money again. I thought about a normal job again. I looked at the sky again without a plan. And then something strange happened. I laughed again. Not because it was funny, but because, seriously? Are we here again? The second almost ending. It was the moment where the story should have ended. A clever ending. I tried. I grew up. I moved on. But I made the wrong decision again. I decided, I don't want to be successful. I want to be honest. I went back to the beginning, to laughter, to absurdity, to truth, without trying to appear superior, without games. And that's when I stopped trying to fly, life pushed me to the edge again. But this time, I wasn't afraid to jump. Chapter 3. I flew before I was ready. There is a moment in life that doesn't seem important. No one takes pictures. No one applauds. It's the day you decide, I don't want to look cool anymore. Not successful, not smart, not promising, just honest. I woke up without a plan, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Before, not having a plan sounded like, you've lost. Now it sounded like, you're alive. I stopped editing myself. I stopped thinking whether it was smart enough. Is it serious enough? Whether it looks like real success. And instead, I started asking, is this true? And you know what? The truth was funny, awkward, a little embarrassing, but it was breathing. Honesty isn't when you tell the truth. Honesty is when you don't hide your weaknesses. And that's scary. Because if you're open and they don't accept you, you have nowhere to run. I thought, if I mess up now, it will be forever. And suddenly I realized, wasn't it like that before? I started saying things that are usually left unsaid. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm afraid it's a coincidence. I think I just fell at the right moment. And instead of silence, I heard, "Thank God, I thought I was the only one." The shift I didn't notice at first. Changes rarely come like an explosion. They come as a few more messages, slightly longer conversations, a little less silence. People no longer waited for content, they waited for me, and that was more responsible than any contract. I stopped asking, "What will work?" and started asking, "What do I really think?" It's a dangerous question. It's often not convenient, but it is honest. This call came on the day when I was as unprepared as possible for the big one. I was in my usual state, without confidence, no energy, no illusions. We think this could be something bigger. I remained silent, because in my head I was thinking, No, you don't understand. I'm only here temporarily." I waited for the question. What is your strategy? What is your vision? Where do you see yourself? But instead it was, just be yourself. That's the point. And that was scarier than any deadline. Here's the truth that no one talks about. Success doesn't ask if you're ready. It just comes and sees if you run away. I felt like a stowaway. Like, "I'll just sit here quietly, okay?" I was waiting for someone to say, "Stop. Mistake. Wrong guy." But instead they said, "Go on." The moment I looked back. Once I actually stopped. I looked back, and I saw myself. With a foolish dream. No skills. No plan. But with strange stubbornness. And for the first time I thought, maybe the problem wasn't me. Maybe I wasn't too late. Maybe I was just following my own path. Flying is not euphoria. It's silence. Silence without fear. It's when you don't run. You don't prove. You don't make excuses. I didn't feel like I was on top. I felt like I belonged. And that was stronger. I used to think that success was armor, that it protects you. In reality, it doesn't. It removes masks. Now I couldn't hide behind ambition, busyness. I'm trying. I just was. And that was enough. I flew earlier than allowed. My dream came true not when I was ready. It came true when I stopped waiting for permission. I didn't become a pilot. I didn't physically take off from the ground. But I did something more difficult. I stopped being afraid of falling. And if you're somewhere in the middle of the journey right now and thinking, "I'm not ready yet," remember, no one is ready. It's just that some people are already in the air.